everyone. Welcome to the Writer's Room. This is Miss Tamara, and today we're going to be talking about middles, the heart of it all. So I'd like to start with a quote from Oscar Wilde. If you haven't heard of him, he wrote things such as The Picture of Dorian Gray, among other works. And this quote sums up what we're going to be trying to do with middles today. This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last. Let's see how we do that using Chapter 5 of Plot and Structure. That's in the Write Great Fiction series. It's by James Scott Bell, Writer's Digest Books, 2004. It's an oldie, but a goodie. James Scott Bell, if you don't know, is the winner of the International Thriller Writers Award and my go-to instructor when it comes to learning the writer's craft. For more, visit his website at jamesscottbell.com. So, Plot and Structure, Chapter 5, Middles. We've got our typewriter there waiting for our work. So, how do you make it through the long middle of your novel? James Scott Bell would like to tell you what you do in Act 2, the middle, is write scenes that stretch the tension, raise the stakes, keep readers worried, and build toward Act 3, the end, in a way that seems inevitable, which leads to death stakes. Know your death stakes. This is going to be crucial in order for you to write your novel from the middle. This is also from James Scott Bell. And what are death stakes? Well, besides the obvious about physical death, James Scott Bell is going to introduce you to a couple different ones. So, James Scott Bell says, I am convinced the most compelling fiction has death hovering over the lead throughout. Besides physical death, there is psychological and professional death. So, psychological death. If someone has the object of their desire close at hand and not having it will mean everlasting loss, we can understand that there will be some dying inside if the object is not realized. Your job as a writer is to make sure the objective must be absolutely crucial to the happiness of the lead. Which brings us to professional death. Set up a situation where loss in this duty, the work world of the character, can mean the end, or at least a massive dilution of their professional life. You will find professional death hangs over leads in legal thrillers, military thrillers, historical novels, if their profession is a major plot point, and also in police procedurals. So what you want to do with the professional death is what keeps the reader reading is worrying about what the lead is going to lose. And then from the death stakes, we look at the opposition. So James Scott Bell says to conceive an opposition character. I use this term rather than villain because the opposition does not have to be evil. The opposition merely has to have a compelling reason to stop the lead. Let's look at some ways you can create opposition. So make the opposition a person. If the opposition is a group, pick one person in the group to take the lead role. Make the opposition stronger than the lead. Ask why you love your opposition character. Climbing into the opposition's skin will give you an empathetic view and a better character as a result. Which leads to one more crucial ingredient to show the reader why the lead cannot walk away from the opposition. This is called adhesive. And James Scott Bell defines an adhesive as any strong relationship or circumstance that holds people together. Let's look at adhesive. So in search of adhesive, there needs to be a strong reason for the lead to stick around, to keep the characters together throughout that long muddle. Figure out why the lead and the opposition cannot withdraw from the action. And once you do that, you will create scenes of confrontation, most ending with some sort of setback for your lead forcing the lead to analyze the situation anew and take some other action toward the objective. So how to make the adhesive strong? Life and death. If the opposition has a strong enough reason to kill the lead, well, that's automatic adhesive. So is there a professional duty for the lead? Moral duty is also a strong adhesive. Is there an obsession involved? And does the physical setting keep the opponents bonded? Next we have arm yourself for confrontation. James Scott Bell reminds us, unless your lead character is doing something, you have no plot. So we have to find ways to keep action going. So James Scott Bell has this very cool ARM system. A equals action, R equals reaction, M equals more action. So you basically go through this for one scene, then just repeat. And before you know it, you've got that middle done. So how do we keep them reading? James Scott Bell says it will help enormously if you think about two principles all the time. Number one is stretching the tension. Number two is raising the stakes. So like that potter that's working in his wheel, you want to keep making and molding the clay for the novelist is trouble. We need to make sure that we are making things worse. So stretching tension. Constantly ask, what problem has the potential to lay some serious hurt on my character? Make sure scenes have something to be tense about. A while back I was doing a workshop for teens and I came up with this interesting graphic. It is from inksandquills.com. They have not updated a lot of articles, but this website has some good writing articles and advice. I advise you to check it out. This graphic says tension, the anticipation of what will happen next in a story. Number one, don't let your characters have what they want. If you do, the story's basically over. Number two, ask how you can make your character's situation worse. Number three, build flaws and conflict into your setting or story world. Number four, create conflict between your characters. And number five, increase the consequences of failure for the hero. How do we stretch the tension? James Scott Bell reminds us that your ability to orchestrate beats so they conform to the tone and feel of the story you're trying to tell is one of the most important skills you can develop. Remember that writing can be taught. You do not have to have a natural talent or anything like that. No matter what your degree of talent is, you just have to practice and learn principles, and you can write a good story. So there's physical stretching. A physical peril or uncertainty is perfect material for the big stretch. When writing a scene, alternate between action, thoughts, dialogue, and description. The questions asked before scene writing. Number one, what is the worst thing from the outside that can happen to my character? Number two, what is the worst trouble my character can get into in this scene? And number three, have I sufficiently set up the danger for readers before the scene? Our next way to do so is emotional stretching. So when a character is in the throes of emotional turmoil, don't make things easy. Again, we have three questions to ask to stretch inner tension. Number one, what is the worst thing from the inside that can happen to my character? Number two, what is the worst information my character can receive? And number three, have I sufficiently set up the depth of emotion for readers before the scene? Practice these principles and keep working at it. We're always a work in progress, and any writing we do is usually an improvement the next day. So next we have raise the stakes. So James Scott Bell reminds us again, if you can create a character worth following and a problem that must be solved, and then along the way raise the stakes even higher, you're going to have the essential elements of a page turner. There are plot stakes, of course, so almost always this is the form of another person trying to do the lead harm. physically, emotionally, or professionally. Again, we have some questions to ask. Number 1, what physical harm can come to the lead? How far can you take that threat? Number 2, what new forces can come into play against my lead? And what other characters can you introduce to make things worse? How would these outside forces operate? Lastly, number 3, is there a professional duty at stake? What's the worst thing that can happen to the lead's career life? There are character stakes. What problem is big enough to make the readers care? Our questions to ask: number 1, how can things get more emotionally wrenching for the lead? Number 2, is there someone the lead cares about who can get caught up in the trouble? And number 3, are there dark secrets from the past that can be revealed? Which leads us to societal stakes. So when social trouble is big enough, it can raise the stakes by adding a huge layer of complication to the lead's woes. There are more questions to ask. Number 1, what are the social aspects of the story that swirl around the character? Number 2, is the character dealing with some huge issue? If not, can you find one? Lastly, number 3, what other characters can line up on either side? So those are our ways to work on the middle. And if you are writing and you find out you have what Bell calls an lethargic middle, these are his tips to energize a lethargic middle, because we don't want to let our plot flatline. So he came up with 6 tips. Number 1, analyze the stakes. Unless it is something that threatens tremendous loss, either physically or emotionally, readers won't care what happens. Number 2, strengthen the adhesive, what bonds the lead and the opposition together. Number 3, add another level of complication. Number 4, add another character, one that will make the lead's life that much more difficult. Number 5, add another subplot. Just remember that subplots must be organic and relate to the main plot. Lastly, number 6, push on through the wall. Sometimes the Act 2 problem is merely writer's exhaustion, a temporary loss of confidence. This is the wall. Most novelists hit it at some point in their first draft. So if you hit the wall, it's normal and there's nothing wrong. Just push through it. And if you have the opposite problem, these are James Scott Bell's tips to trim an overweight middle. Act 2 is the biggest challenge the novelist faces. But if you have laid a solid foundation through the lock system and you use the principles in this chapter, you'll find you actually enjoy the writing. You're creating a plot that works. So ways to get a leaner, meaner Act 2. Number 1, combine or cut characters. I have found I've had to do that before, and I'm usually no more the loss for having gotten creative about how to get one character to fill 2 roles. Number 2, absorb a subplot. Or number 3, trim the dullness. And if you need a refresher on James Scott Bell's lock system, here it is. The L is for lead, your main character. O is for objective, what does your lead want? C is for confrontation, what opposition is your lead facing from other characters and or outside forces. And K is for knockout. You want your ending to have that knockout wow power. And I have found, since I discovered this lock system in 2004, it's a very good way to start out a story, especially if you like character-driven stories. We're going to put it into practice now. The only way out is through. That is a quote by poet Robert Frost. In my plots, I like to think of the middle as the only way out is through for my characters. As an example I have for you today, Gretchen McNeil used this principle well in her novel No Escape. I just read this novel, and it is a young adult thriller, and the premise is this. 8 contestants are selected for an escape room championship. There is a catch, of course. Once the players begin the challenge, there is no stopping it, no going back. A flowchart in the first room gives hints of rooms ahead. Once a contestant dies, the remaining 7 must work together to beat the remaining challenges and survive. Their only way out is through, and McNeil makes things increasingly difficult and deadly. Talk about your death stakes. My other thing I like to follow is things get worse. If you need to, tape that up by your writing instruments and just keep remembering how you can make things worse before the end. So where I came across this, author and editor Dean Wesley Smith once gave tips for a Star Trek writing contest. One of the principles was remember that things get worse for your character or characters. And one of my all-time favorite classics is The Odyssey by Homer. If you're not familiar with it, basically it is the 10-year quest of Odysseus to find his way home after the Trojan War. Since this was originally a narrative told by a storyteller long before books were written down, the middle kept the listeners fascinated with the journey getting worse for Odysseus, thanks to the wrath of Greek gods who were on the side of the Trojans. My example for you today is again my fan fiction, Love as Strong as Death, for Once Upon a Time. It was by ABC Disney. I've been writing for 5 years now, and it pays tribute to the Odyssey as Rumpelstiltskin's own Odyssey through Hades, the Dream Realm, our world to the Enchanted Forest, where things get very, very worse before there is even a possible quote-unquote happy ending in sight. By making things worse on Rumpel, he does have a lot to atone for after all. I hope fans will click to that next chapter to see if, like Odysseus, Rumpel makes it home to his beloved Belle and his son Bay. I've picked out 3 of the exercises from the chapter to share with you today. Number 1, define how your lead will die, either physically, professionally, or psychologically, if they do not achieve the objective. If you can't ask yourself if the objective is truly crucial to the lead's well-being, find a way to make it so important readers will understand why the objective must be achieved. Exercise number 2, deepen your opposition character. Find an answer to the question, why do I love this character? Have you given this character justifications for what they do? Is the character as strong or stronger than the lead? If not, make them so. Lastly, exercise number 3, what are the stakes in the novel? Look at each aspect, plot, character, and society. If you are missing one, consider adding it to the mix. And then consider how you can raise each one to its maximum level in the course of the novel. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you again for joining me for Middles, the Heart of It All. If you want more middling, check out James Scott Bell's Write Your Novel from the Middle. If you're like me and you write by scenes and sometimes then like to go organize them later, this is a good book. If you're an outliner, it's also a good book. So it's kind of for that in-between pantster and plotter or anybody. It's a good book to play around with to learn to write better scenes. And if you're a Once Upon a Time fan, you can read Love as Strong as Death at https://archiveofourown.org/5625292/chapters/13592-356. How do you look at middles? Please share your tips, thoughts, and any questions in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. If you have a detailed question or want to share work for critique, you can email me at tmenninger@midpointlibrary.org. And to keep up with what's happening at the Midpoint Library System, please like us on Facebook and Instagram, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And always, keep on writing. Until the next time, I hope to hear from you. I hope that these are helping you create great fiction. And if you have any questions, please always email me. Thank you, and goodbye for now.